Hello everyone. Good morning to Shravan sir and good evening to you all. You are eagerly waiting for the session, right? Yes. This is Let's start our session with a powerful and energetic invocation. Invocation by our Sandhya.
This is who we are. We are a team. Talented, energetic, astonishing mindsets. We can do anything and everything. We talk, we care, we respect each other. We see beauty in everything. We are connected by hearts and driven by values. We celebrate each other. We provide value to each other. We take ownership in everything we do. We have freedom to make mistakes. We learn as we go. We are mad to make a difference. We love disruptive ideas. We make impossible things possible. We are strong to question the creation. We believe in dreaming big. If we do not dare to dream big, are we really living? Why be ordinary when we can be extraordinary? We should be driven by our goals, not by egos. We can do it, we will do it. Let us not hope for the best, let us be the best. This is who we are. Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you, Apurva.
Always
The
inspirational.
invocation is more powerful in your beautiful voice. Now, let us witness an amazing quote by our Divya.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thankfulness is the beginning of gratitude. Gratitude is the completion of thankfulness. Thankfulness may consist merely of words. Gratitude is shown in acts. Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you for the fabulous quote. Now it's my call to introduce our top speaker, right? Today, our top speaker is our none other than our A.N. Garu. A.N. Garu completed his MBA in Institute of Technology and Management, and A.N. Garu completed his BTech Chemical Engineering in National Institute of Technology, Warangal. A.N. Garu is working as a strategic advisor in Fortunes Technologies and strategic advisors in Valley, India. A.N. Garu worked as Vice President at Global Delivery Technology Infrastructure Services. Skills of sharing remote infrastructure management, organizational leadership, PMT, vendor management, solution architecture. Honors, Distinguished Alumni Professional Achievement Award by NIT Warangal, March 21. University Gold Medal for Academic Excellence by Kakatiya University, April 1982. Do you know all? Do you know all? Today our A.N. Garu is going to say about the basic understanding of 7 basic SQC tools. Now A.N. Garu will take the lead.
I think my future session, there should be no introduction. Just our mentor, A.N. Garu. Okay?
It's your fault, AN. You have such a long pedigree. You have achieved so much.
You just call me old, Geeta.
No, I didn't.
One second, I'll get the presentation mode, and then off we go.
See, this is a pretty favorite topic of mine. Right through my career, till almost the year I retired, I used to run a little more elaborate version of this session to all managers run operations for a very simple reason. Anybody who cannot interpret data and take meaningful decisions cannot be a manager and forget being a leader. So it is important that to help them grow that particular muscle of talking to data. You can have a conversation with data. Hopefully, that makes more sense to you whether I'm done here. And this has been acquiring a lot more urgency now. Some of you, I spoke about the 4 industries, right? We are in Industry 4.0. Industry 1.0 was, the steam engine. Industry 4.0 is the digital transformation, where one of the big things that is happening is a massive, humongous explosion of data. And data has kind of become our life. if you look at the numbers, they say that between 2006 and 2020, the data that the world deals with has gone to about 50,000 exabytes. Anyone knows how much an exabyte is? Can you go take a guess?
1,000 terabytes.
So that an
10
exabyte.
power 6.
Can you count?
Okay,
Yeah.
no.
Can't even count the zeros. It says it's 238,000 years of non-stop video calls, or 100 times all printed material on this world, and 400 human brains worth of memory. So that's the kind of data that we're dealing with. It's they say data is the new oil, data is the new life, but at the same time, there's so much of it is that is hitting us all the time. It's really, really intimidating. So there must be a way to deal with it meaningfully. Bit of that is what we're going to look at now. I always go back to my favorite leader, Satya. In the world that we are in, and in the world that all of you are growing into, the careers that you'll be making into, everything is going to be connected to the cloud, connected to data, and what builds them, what brings them together, what mediates them is the software. So if data, cloud, and software are going to be such an inseparable part of our life, let's dig a little into one of those elements today, which is on the data. Okay. The sources of data are absolutely exploding if you really look at it. Search engines, data, location-based services that keep coming towards the social media, content sites and blogs. It's enormous. With so much of it, so much of data hounding us, intimidating us, is it some way to deal with them meaningfully in a rather simple way? But before I get on to that, listen, I think this is going to be a fairly interactive session. Okay, there are multiple places I'm going to pause and say, what do you think? So I'm actually making a start saying, when I say data, what does that mean to you? What crosses your mind? Because you must be hearing data mentioned to you a zillion times every day. So when you say data, what does that mean to you? What is the thought that crosses your mind? Can you type in the chat window? What does data mean to you intellectually in your life? Words, messages, awesome. Top sell has a lot of data. Let's start analyzing the data, numbers, and well-sorted information. Good going. That's a great start. Information. Okay. That's good. Keep that participation coming because I'm going to ask for a lot more of that from you as we go. I went and said data word cloud. 100 images came up. Look at what the web threw at me. And a majority of us are familiar with the majority of our words on the screen. We're talking about enrichment, we're talking about business intelligence, authentication, data correction, business information, big data, whole lot of it. And all the time, people are speaking to about the various tools and the data. So there is an enormous amount of data. We're talking about technologies, we're talking about tools, and every single business leader has a lot to say about it. In fact, for example, I just sampled, for example, Vinod Khosla, you know the founder of Sun Microsystems. They probably shut down before many of you are born. Facebook has taken over that office, by the way, and used the Sun Microsystems main board at the entrance of the company. They turned it around and put their name on it. At the back of it, you'll see Sun Microsystems. Their idea is, let's never, die like Sun Microsystems. But this guy is still a visionary. He said 80% of all the data are going to go away because big data is going to replace them. IBM ex-CEO, Gingometti, she said, look, companies will go extinct if they don't take this data and data-based customer segmentation very seriously. She says we have to figure out what every single customer needs And if I'm not good at it, you're going to die as a corporation. And then an SVP at retail at Apple, again, she's saying, look, your business, your existence, your corporation, your corporate, they're all going to depend on your ability as an organization, as a leader, to deal with data. But that's not the part I want to touch today. It's not just about the technology, not just about the business, the strategy. There is another side to it, which I want to talk about, which is the people that sit between data on one side and enormous amount of decisions, strategies, investment that they make other side. The people in between. What does data mean when you look at the perspective of the people? Because the data has to pass through the people, either as raw data or process information, for them to take the decisions. So this is the part I'm going to talk about today. Data to me is a thought process. Okay, I owe you an explanation for that pretty random statement, which I'll try and do in the next 5 minutes. If data is a behavioral preference. We talk about the fake data, fake news. We talk about the WhatsApp experts, WhatsApp surgeons, WhatsApp doctors. Number of things that get said without the being backed up by data. People are making outstanding, outrageous statements about vaccines, about the disease. Everyone's an expert. So what has really happened, one of the things that happened in the realm of social media is being dissociated with the need to use data to speak. By growing up here, they say, speak with the data. My boss always used to say, speak with the data. When you say something, are you able to substantiate it with data? So that's what I'm saying. Data is a behavioral preference. It's not a random saying of anything that comes to your mind because you heard it from XYZ or read it in a WhatsApp forward. And more importantly, this is what we're going to dwell a little bit on. It's an approach to problem solving and decision making. One of the most important things, or the two of the most important things you'll be doing in all your career is, there are problems big and small that need to be solved in a methodological, scientific, data-based way. And you need to take decisions, because when you start the career, your decision impact just you and your family. But as you grow, your decisions could impact whole countries or corporations. Okay, so to me, data is not just all the tools. Data is just not all the what Ginni Rometty said or what Satya Nadella said. It's about a way of life, a way of thinking of all of us as people that deal with all this data. So this is exactly what I try to do all my life, ever since I myself have been introduced to this thought process. I think I'm talking about 1991 onwards. My boss was trained by Toyota himself. He was trained in the Japanese manufacturing methods. Okay, let me share some of the thought process with you and see what you have to say. Okay, here is in the season of cricket. I'm not a big fan of cricket. After 20 years, I watched a match on 24th, and you all know what happened in that match. So after that, I said, I'll go back to not watching cricket. So, but I'm taking a cricket example. Hopefully relate to that much better. This is the data tabulation of two good cricketers, Afridi and Misbah Ul Haq. If you, as a team manager, have been asked to pick one of the two to be in your team, are you neutral? Are you okay with either? Do you prefer one over the other? What is your answer?
That is really hard, Ian.
Actually not. I'll prove in a moment why it's not.
Go ahead.
But shoot, Shravan, who would you pick and why? Guys, yeah.
I probably would pick Afridi just because he's a disruptor. He is an X factor. He can make things happen when it's so unexpected, and he doesn't call the notes. So.
Okay, anyone want to contest that? And you'll have to tell me why. You remember I said, look, whatever you say, I'll say save it data. If I say my name is Geeta, I'll say Geeta, give me data to prove that you are Geeta. You'll not share my birth certificate. So yeah, that's the session today. So what will you do and why?
I would pick Huck on first instinct because I see that he's more consistent.
Exactly, hit the nail on the head. Now, the same data, I'll present you in a slightly different format and see, Shravan, if you'll pick somebody else. So I just plotted them on an x-axis saying, their scores, right? Scores going all the way from 70 to 100. Misbah has, look at his consistency. He scored between 80 and 95, whereas Afridi is a little spread out. He's like a Sachin Tendulkar, a little inconsistent. He's a 2 or 200, not like a Rahul Dravid who will always give you a 50. Okay? So
I think, Ian, the reason was that I know Afridi can bowl. Afridi can field better than Misbah. So I have other extra
but
information.
I'm only asking for a batsman.
I know.
Asking for a guy who can cook a biryani, not a masala dosa.
Yes.
Okay. So when I say, look, data is a way of thinking, because often what happens is by our own preferences, by we know what we know of them, we tend to take decisions that may or may not always be right. That's the reality of it. Okay. So this is a one simple example. We'll actually touch about a couple of more examples as we go. Are you guys with me? Who you're not answering, guys? You have to use your chat window. Okay.
Are you asking us to shut up, Ian?
Yeah.
Just kidding. Sorry.
No, I'm asking others to talk. So guys, who would you pick if you have to? I mean, you're a manager. You're putting a team together. You have to. There's only one slot left, and you have to select between these two. Who will you select?
I'll go with the second one.
You'll go with the second one because it's more predictable. It's I don't want a hero or a zero. I want a hero. Okay. So
Then, GP here, Paddy here. If you ask me, I'll go with Shravan. I'll pick Afridi. The reason I'm saying is, see, this is too consistent between plus or minus 5 of 85, which means that I can only expect between 80 and 90 from Misbah. I mean, as a captain, I'm saying. Suppose I want him to score 100, there is a better chance that probability of Afridi scoring 100 than Misbah. I mean, you look at it in a different way. The same data, I mean, I'm also looking at data here and the way you put it up. But the same data, I mean, as a manager, if you ask me, I'll probably say Afridi has a better chance of scoring 100 because he's not, because of his inconsistency. The very inconsistency makes it possible that he could probably get 100. The statistically probably a better chance of getting 100 than Misbah, who will probably end up scoring always between 80 and 90. I mean, not really true, but I'm just analyzing data here.
Spot on. GP, I'm glad you provoked because I was waiting for somebody to say, yeah, and are they playing a 5-day or are they playing a T20? Right?
Right.
So exactly. So I think there are two things that come out here, right? See, the previous set of data helps you a certain extent. In a traditional sense, they both have a mean of 85. You'll say, hey, both are equal, I'll toss a coin and decide. But when you start presenting the data a little differently, and then you start applying context on the data, is where you take the right decisions. Bang on. GP, awesome. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks.
And also the data which you had were for certain years. You didn't include some of the years in there. So if you put those years in there, the data, if you put consecutive years, it probably would have given us some other information.
Yeah, but
exactly. No, I'm asking you to take a decision based on the data that's available.
Yeah.
But you didn't say whether it is okay. Got it.
Exactly. I'll say if this is today's data, you have to take a decision on what would you do and why. Right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. So that brings us to a fascinating time in industrial history between 1950s and 60s. I was just about born in 60. Phil Crosby went to, in summer of, I think, late 50s. He presented at 2 conferences, quality manufacturing, one in US and one in Japan. He spoke about zero defect. Americans thought it's a ratio. The Japanese thought it's a mindset. And their journey started from there. So maybe the US auto industry say, hey, look, if you produce less defects, I'll promote you. Whereas Japan, they said, look, if you produce less defects, customer will give us more orders. See, that's also the time Edward Deming of the Deming Prize quality, right? They actually came with an enormous amount of study, research work in the area of statistical quality control, statistical process control. They're saying, how are you going to use mathematical models, statistics to predict the quality of the product that we produce? How can we say that if we produce a car, it will not fail for 40,000 kilometers? But then they found that was becoming a little intimidating. So people like Kaoru Ishikawa, they all came in and they extracted them into 7 simple basic SQC tool, which it was very, very easy to train the guys on the production line on. Okay, each of the 7 tools comes packed with so much of a potential. In fact, the more every time I talk about it, I see a different view on that. So what we're going to do today is a very, very, very quick treatise of these 7 tools. And after each tool, I'm going to pause, and there's going to be some interaction. This time, it will not be Shravan and Geeta speaking. This will be everyone less than 40 years will speak. Okay? Dean?
I am 16. Sorry.
Yeah. I was told that when I turned 61, I'm 16 with 40 years of experience. Okay, everyone younger than Geeta will speak. Guys, you're good with that? Okay, deal, Vinay. Awesome. So,
Geeta, less than 18 means you're a minor, you can't talk.
Exactly. Thank you. Who sir came to my rescue? So, the 7 basic SQC tools. There's going to be a quiz at the end. You'll have to repeat all the 7, so pay attention. I'm also going to use a lot of reinforcement to make sure you won't forget. The first one is called a check sheet. Very, very dumb looking check sheet. We use it all the time. When I say, look, how many people attended this session, you're going to talk about it. When I say, look, you gave clothes to Adobe, you got them back. When I say, look, I gave so many shirts, so many trousers, so many handkerchiefs, so many towels, how many did I give, how many got them back. Check sheet, you also call it the data collection sheet. You know, when my boss first told me data collection is to like, I kind of you must have thought I was laughing. He said, look, don't laugh. Data collection or check sheet is one of the tools used for data collection, is where most organizations go incredibly wrong. Large corporations, billion-dollar corporations. And then this is where the whole journey starts in terms of how do you want to deal with data? Let me explain. Sorry, we'll actually come back. The second one is the fishbone diagram. It's also called the Ishikawa diagram. It's called the cause and effect diagram. One of my favorites. Okay, second is the fishbone diagram. The third is the histogram. We use it all the time. For Shravan says, hey, look, do we have a distribution of how long the mentees have to travel to go to reach the university? He'll probably say less than 5 kilometers, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20. We'll actually say how many people fall in each. So that's a histogram. Okay. Then fourth, we have a Pareto chart. Okay. I think I just introduce then come back and talk about each of them later. Yeah, the fourth is the Pareto chart, or also called the 80-20 chart. Then you have a control chart. Okay. Then you have the scatter diagram. And lastly, you have a stratification, stratifying the data. We'll spend 3-4 minutes looking at each of them. So you have the check sheet to summarize, right? You have the fishbone diagram, the histogram, the Pareto chart, the control chart, scatter diagram, and stratification. Okay. So it's really my desire that if you can carry home some clear thoughts on at least 2 or 3 of them. For example, stratification. For example, fishbone diagram and Pareto. Then I think the objective of this session is done, because even if you not very comfortable, control chart and scatter diagram at this stage is okay. Just 2 or 3 which will keep coming back into your lives irrespective of what you do. You know, stratification. You may call them that, or you may not call them that, but you'll be using them. Okay, good to go? 7 tools. Check sheet or data collection. Lot of time you completely go wrong. Let's say you're conducting a 25-year-long study on a progress of a certain disease. Unless you spent a lot of time at the start of the study saying, hey, look, what broadly are we wanting to look at? What are we really studying? Therefore, what data should we be collecting over these 25 years? It can go horribly wrong. A good example is the climate change experts. They've been collecting melting of the ice cap, changing of the temperature, ocean temperature. They've collected the data over 100 years. So 100 years later, now they're able to look back and say, guys, listen, this is the damage that's actually happening out there. So unless you broadly know what data you need to collect based on why you are collecting the data, you can go horribly wrong. And there's no way on earth you can go back and collect all the data again. It's all lost, because data is at a point of time. Either you have collected it or you have not collected it. There's a wonderful example. You know, this is one of the Toyota case study. You know what this is? The picture on the screen? Any guesses?
Is it something you put on the windshield?
It is the windshield. It is the windshield. Awesome. So one of the Toyota subsidiaries was having a really large number of windshield failure data that kept coming back. They're doing a lot of study on now why these windshield failures are happening. So they're not making rapid progress. Till one of the guys on the production shop floor came with a great idea. This guy drew the shape of the windshield on a whiteboard, and every time a failure data was reported, he went and marked what part of the windshield the failure was happening. So this guy took the shape of the windshield itself as a data collection tool, and when he collected the data over, let's say, 500,000 whatever failed things that came back from the field, they said, look, the failure were all getting confined to one corner. After that, they said maybe there's a stress concentration happening out there. Once you figure out what is causing the problem, resolution is often difficult. You know, in most problem-solving situations, solution is never hard. Knowing what the problem is hard. So in this case, right, they use data collection itself as a method for diagnosis there. So it's very, very powerful. Anytime you start a study, first thing is, sit down and spend a lot of time into what is it we're trying to do, what all data should we be collecting, at what granularity. Do we measure the temperature in a room once a day, once a week, once an hour, once in 30 minutes? Okay. When we come to stratification, I'll give you a very nice example. I have a massive customer crisis I had in my working years. We wouldn't have solved it if we had not collected the data every 20 minutes in a particular engagement. Okay. Underlying this is the simple model. It's called the problem assumption matrix. So what is the problem you're trying to solve? In fact, Ishika's, you said you often don't know what the problem is. What is the symptom that you're responding to? You know, there is a water leakage in the tap. So the problem is not the leakage. Symptom is the leakage. A valve inside going wrong is the problem. Okay. So what's the problem? And to start solving it, you start making some assumptions. And to validate the assumption, you collect the data. Okay. In the example I gave, we say, hey, look, there could be a leaking valve, there could be high pressure on that, maybe the tap itself is mechanically damaged. You make an assumption. Based on the assumption, you collect the data, and then you come back and say, look, which could be the results. So that's data collection as a tool. This is my favorite one. Let's say you want to get, let's say, a man-eater tiger shark. You're not trying to get somebody assassinated. So there are 4 guys. 4 guys, you call them for a shooting test. You got their data. Okay, these are, they all, went around shooting how many, whatever number of rounds, 6 rounds each, right? At a target. They got you the data and said, sir, please make a pick. Who do you want to select? By the way, number 4 is not available because someone has already paid a higher amount to take him away. Which of these 3 guys will you select as your shooter? The question is clear, right? These are the shooting results of a 4 marksmen. So you got the shooting board, the bullseye is back with you. They said, look, pick one of these guys. I mean, the 4th guy is obviously very, very easy, right? He shot all bullseyes, but you say, sir, unfortunately, he's not available. So who am I going to select? Can we start seeing some replies in the chat window, please? Number 2. Okay, Rohit, you say Gita, you say number 2, number 2, number 2. GP, you're picking number 1. Shravan, number 1. Kaushik, number 1. 1 is a favorite guy. And if you want to tell me why 1 or why 2, once I hear your answer, I'll actually add a little more data. Okay, Nikhil, you're saying number 2, Kaushik 1. Cool, very clearly, none of you want 3. I mean, that seems fairly clear. Okay. The answers you're giving are the foundation of the way Canon, the camera company, right, the precision mechatronics company, designed a lot of their manufacturing quality practices. So what you're saying is something very profound. So anybody who said 1 or 2, you want to say why? Why 1 or why 2?
Can I, or you'll wait for somebody younger?
Okay.
I think Satish, somebody else also said 1. Maybe, they should answer, I think.
Yeah, GP, yeah, I would go with that, GP. Anybody who said 1? Hey, Kaushik. Hey, buddy, why? Why are you quiet, yeah? Why do you want to pick 1?
Nikhil raised his hand.
Hey, Nikhil, shoot, man. Why 2?
Yes, sir. Like 2 is a person who I think like he has the skill of hitting nearer to the goal, right? With some guidance or with some practice, he will be able to reach the center point, I guess.
So if you want to pick him as your bodyguard, so you'll be more comfortable picking 2 than 1 today. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe GP, I want to hear you, yeah.
Yeah, see, his consistency baffles me. I look at it as like he just needs a correction. It's like, suppose he had an eye problem, let's say a squint eye. He'd probably be seeing the center a little off. To me, this guy looks like, he's seeing the center a little off, either in his gun or in his eyesight. He just needs a small bit of correction and every shot will fall right on dot in the center. The way he's shooting, it's absolutely accurate. Either he's seeing something, he's seeing the center spot a little away, or something is wrong with his gun. So he is actually precise, but maybe he's a little way off. Just needs a small correction and all the shots will be in center.
Spot on. So here, see the correction required to bring A, the number 1, to be as precise as 4 is very easy. Maybe his hand is sprained that day, maybe his gun requires a little bit of calibration, whereas the 2 requires a lot more training. So here again, right, see, in this case, the target itself became your data collection point. reason I'm belaboring so much on data collection is how you collect data has a lot of influence on your downstream analysis and taking a decision out here. In this case, GP is part on, because this guy, if you really see, his precision is very high, accuracy needs correcting. Okay. The second guy is in and around, his accuracy is there, but precision is very diffused. Third guy is messed up on both, and the fourth guy is good on all four. Okay. Now it's your turn. One of the mentees has to respond. So can you think of one situation in real life where you need to collect data? I'm not saying how will you collect data, what data will you collect. There probably is some situation where you collect data.
Yeah.
Any data collection?
One example
Anything.
might be if you organize an event, we can collect the number of people visiting that event and arrangements and all. We need some data to figure it out.
Exactly. And how will you collect the data? You collect it based. I think I already gave the answer. Yeah. How many live where? How many live in Gachibowli? If 30 live in Gachibowli, I arrange a bus. If 2 live in Sikandrabad, I'll just organize an auto, right?
Yeah, location, transportation and all. Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you. So that's data collection. Second is the fishbone diagram. It's called the Hick-Hans diagram, fishbone diagram, Ishikawa diagram, cause and effect diagram. People really love this. For reasons easy to understand, this is a very favorite one. So I'll actually take a, 1 second, I think I have another, I'll take this example. So this particular outlet of McDonald's started making bad burgers. Okay, so they want to figure out what's going wrong. So the problem that they could solve, they put at the head of the fish. And then often in this mode of study, they use a 4 or 6 branch approach. They say, if the burgers are not coming good, one of the 4 things could have gone wrong, right? The people could have gone wrong, the material could have gone wrong, the process could have gone wrong, the method, the machine could have gone wrong. So often, in fact, in the more recent version, they also talk about environment as an additional element and measurement as an additional element. Then typically what is done is they actually sit in a brainstorming session. They say, take a bad burger, right? For example, material. Hey, what can go wrong in material? Somebody say, hey, raw material can go wrong. You say, what raw material? Is raw material, maybe it's not fresh, it's not as per prescribed quality. So they go on saying another what. Typically they say, if you can answer a what 5 times, you would have come to the end of a solution. Or somebody said maybe it's unhygienic packing, so it's getting damaged. Someone says, hey, look, I think there's something wrong with the people who are handling. I say, what do you mean something wrong with the handling? He says, maybe there is mishandling. What do you mean mishandling? They're storing in an unhygienic condition, or there is insufficient training on to cook and store the people in it. So what they typically do is take a whiteboard, put these 6 main branches, right, in the fish bone. You put these materials, methods, machine, environment, measurement, and personnel. By and large, 90-95% of the problem resolution, you can get to an answer with one of the using the 6 branches, irrespective of what the problem is. They used it when the space shuttle blew up. They said, look, what happened? One of the background studies, they actually did an extensive fishbone to say, hey, what all could have gone wrong, and they came up with the ILC. Okay. And once they have a set of possible reasons, right, then they collect the data on that. They say, hey, look, not fresh, material not being fresh could be a reason. Do you have any data to say that we had non-fresh material? If they say no, we don't, they actually strike it off. Once you do that, you'll actually come down. Once you collect the data on each of these possible causes, right? Method, flawed method, somebody has not followed the method. Instead of putting in a microwave, put it in a freezer. Then you come back and you get down to root cause analysis. And fishbone diagram is powerfully useful in problem diagnosis, what it is also doing is it's using very subjective headings, right? Material, people, machine, environment, what can go wrong. And then you typically use experts to participate in this because it's an explosion in chemical plant. You might want people who are familiar with that. And then it's very, 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 very powerful method for what you call a RCA, root cause analysis. Once I have a symptom, once I know what's going wrong, how do you go back to what could be causing it to be going wrong, and then solving it? Okay. So typically you take the man-machine measurement, the nature, environment, etc. Take. I want to keep it simple. Actually say the man, material, machine, and methods. Just 4 elements. We can really get to the root of most bad situations. Your turn. Can you think of a scenario where you can apply this?
The root causes of less production in a production plant.
Root cause of less production situation. Okay. When suppose I say, look, how do you? We have 19 participants here, right? So we wanted 1,000 participants here. There are only 19. So can we use this for a situation like that? You're saying how do you increase the attendance? How do you increase the attendance is a bad way of putting it. How do we have a more audience for a particular session? Let's say you're doing a session next. Then you can go and say, look, what is it that causes people to attend or not attend? Then again, it can come down to saying, look, the man, it can be the speaker, or it can be the machine, right? You say
marketing.
Connectivity is normally bad. Marketing is not very good, right? So you can use any of those situation, and fishbone diagram usually helps you get to the solution. I remember in my manufacturing days, there is a particular power supply that used to fail. We used to have almost about 64% field failures. We were able to bring it down to 0.2% in less than 5 months, just by doing repeated fishbone analysis. Okay, so that's the second tool. Third is the histogram. Histogram is honestly much simpler. You are by and large you're trying to classify the data on one dimension. For example, the picnic example you gave for the first data collection. So you might just say, hey, look, 0 to 5 kilometers, how many do we have? 5 to 10 kilometers, how many do we have? You just do that classifying, and then based on that, take a decision. Or you say you have to decide only vegetarian menu or a non-vegetarian menu. Or a non-vegetarian menu, you want to give only chicken or a mutton or a fish. So often, slicing on a one dimension, the reason I keep saying slicing on one dimension is we'll cover that when it comes to stratification. You take one dimension that is important and then decide what to take. For example, take setting up a meeting. You might actually want to see, give 4 or 5 different dates and say how many can attend this one, this one, this one. And often you might want to go with the one that is most likely to get you the most amount of attendance. There's another very, very important reason you do this. Average versus median. You're clear what median is from your Stat 1 classes, first year or a second year math session? When you take average, yeah, please, Vinay.
Nothing. At the middlemost value.
Exactly. It's not the most median one is the one with the highest frequency. See the example I just gave, right? You have 4 possible days on which you can have a holiday get together, go to Meena Ma'am's farm. So you set out a poll asking people to respond. And you can only choose one of those dates, it can't be postponed. What you're most likely to do is pick a date that is convenient to most of the people. You're actually taking the median there. There are often, the classification with the most people might actually help you make that decision. Often averages don't help. This is really a joke. If you see the one in the center, right? This is actually the box plot. You see that T kind of a line out there. This is that high variation. I might have a very low average, but I might have a high variation. Okay. So often use a histogram. You actually pick with a high frequency and a low variation, like high run rate with low unpredictability kind of a thing. Okay. I might have a good average rate. I can score anywhere between 0 and 100. My average is 50. Someone else may hit only between 40 and 16. His or her average is also 50. Okay. So often we call it the trap of the average. So histogram is a good way of walking away from an average and seeing where most concentration of our people or results or our data lies out there. It's again a very, very useful tool which we use quite often. A fascinating example of a usage of a histogram. When they did a demographic study of Indian and Chinese population, and they're saying, look, how is it going to go over a period of time? What they did was plotted a histogram, normally plotted horizontally, plotted vertically here. We really see the columns are of 0 to 4 years, 5 to 9 years, 10 to 14 years, okay? And they say, let's extrapolate this for 2040. So for the growth of the economy, what we really need is a lot of our people in what we call the productive working years. Let's say between 20 to 50. From that, India is actually, the demography is such that you're in a favorable position, let's say compared to China. There is an aging population and there is a, so China actually did the study. They went away from a single child policy. They're trying to encourage, now they're finding it very, very, very hard to increase the population because people got used to having only one child or not having a child. Reversing that is going to be very, very difficult out there. What really caused a sense of urgency is plotting a simple histogram to say, hey, look, what is our age-wise population distribution and what is it going to look like at the current growth rate out there. So histogram can be a very, very powerful decision-making tool. You say, what is the desired position I want to be in? Where am I? And how am I going to shift that? So for China, the good way to reverse that is now have a 3 children rule. So over a period of 20 years, we can actually start increasing the bottom of this pyramid. Okay. So decision can be taken at the individual level, at a company level, or even at a national level with simple histograms. Okay. Your turn. An example. Can we have anyone who has not yet spoken speak? There are no trick questions here. These tools are so simple that they almost sound commonsensical. So don't worry about wrong answers. Is there a situation where you had to use a histogram to collect information?
We are having Top Talks on Wednesday and Sunday, right? So okay. we can plot something where we'll have more attendance. Is it on Wednesday or Sunday, according to the past data?
Excellent. When we used to have the Rotary Club meetings, so equivalent of a Top Talks, there you actually slice the Zoom gives you data on how many people you had in every 5-minute slice interval. We were able to use that to actually shift the timing by about 30 minutes to actually maximize the presence of most people for most of the session.
Wow. Is it going to give in the Excel sheet form, sir?
You can actually download the data from Zoom.
Okay.
That admin report. We found that just by shifting it by half an hour, the people joining pattern, maybe it's the time of the day or the traffic of the day, it just helped enormously. So histograms are very, very powerful. They're simple, but they can be See, good thing about these tools is they're very simple because they had to dump them down to almost commonsensical level and teach a lot of the production workers on the floor and help them use them consistently. That's the power of it. Okay, we do have our Hadoops, we have a big data, you have a number crunching, quantum mechanics, all that out there, but they cannot do anything that you haven't thought of before. If you haven't told the algorithm what direction you want to create your data cube in, what you want to, that's where the the intervention of the human mind between the data and the final outcome is very, very important. So these things actually prompt the, not so much about the tool, it's about promoting a certain thought process on how you approach data. Pareto principle. Sorry, you're saying something?
I have this doubt, like how can we do we have any tools to check if the data available is wrong or right? Sometimes we can't analyze whether it is wrong or right because I might not be I don't know what happened before 2000, right? So I might have to depend on the data. So are there any tools to check if it is correct?
So the one of the golden principles of data, again, Dr. Kaoru Ishikawa, he said, use data, speak data, always seek data. When you get the data, question the data. So what happens is when you say question the data accuracy may come into question for two reasons. One is the data itself. For example, if you're going back 200 years and you have the temperature data, maybe the temperature measurement itself was not very accurate out there. So if you know the source of suspicion about the data, for example, if they are using 1 meter long alcohol thermometers versus a mercury thermometer versus a digital thermometer, you know how to apply a correction. But it's always a healthy approach to say, hey, look, what if the data I collected was wrong? Somewhere maybe my conversion factor, like inches to millimeter conversion, I went only to 2 decimals and not to 3, and I'm calculating intergalactic distances, those kind of things out there. So the Vinay, the thing about data is you have to iteratively put it through a triangulation test. Okay, which is why these are the 7 basic SQL tools, right? In the advanced tool, we have a thing called testing of hypothesis. Very, very, very strong tools. There, you don't straight away make a decision. Use the first step to arrive at a hypothesis, then use a very strong statistical econometric models to actually validate the hypothesis. But in I think most day-to-day situations, if you are careful in your data design, data selection, right? If you know what you want to do. For example, all I'm trying to do is figure out how to reach office in half the time. Then all I have to do is stand at a big traffic jam place and then look at the traffic density in 5 minute slices. Then I'll say, look, if I leave at home at 8:20 instead of 8:30, I'll reach office 30 minutes faster. Those kind of things out there. Okay. Most times you don't hit those things right in one go, which is where the last of the tools I'll talk about, stratifications, comes in very, very powerfully. But good question, and I think that's
but what was the basis before the question is, I was told this that suppose say if someone hypothesizes eating apple will cause cancer, if you type in the same, if you type the same in Google, it will give data like apple actually causes cancer. But if you type the reverse sentence, it will also give the data where it states that it doesn't cause cancer. So what shall we rely on? Because Google is Google.
Neither of it is a data. Google is a search engine. Google is not a data provider. It crawls all over the web, finds anything, does some natural language processing that has a apple, cancer, and sickness, and brings all the stuff and dumps it on you. Okay, Google doesn't. Google is not a smart thing. It's a smart search algorithm. It's not a data collection or a cleaning algorithm. He'll go whatever is lying all over the World Wide Web, he'll bring and throw it at you. And if somebody spend more time on a search engine optimization, you'll actually get that on a higher level. Okay, number one. The second mistake we often make is causation versus a correlation. Okay, two parameters growing together doesn't mean one is causing the other. Okay, take an earthquake. Somebody comes and says, I counted a lot of houses falling and I counted a lot of people running. He says when a lot of people run very fast, houses fall. Okay. So technically there's a correlation, but the causation is an earthquake. When there's an earthquake, houses fall and people run. Okay. So often we fall into causation and correlation confusion, which is why you really need to test to know is it a y is a is it an X variable or a Y variable? We need to figure out. Is that did the dog bite the man or man bit the dog? You have to be. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Pareto principle. I think all of us use it all the time. If I have only 1 hour, what do I want to do? Okay, because it is established with a stunning accuracy that irrespective of what you look at, there is an 80-20 principle. 20% of the people ask 80% of the question. If there is a WhatsApp group, 20% people make most noise. Okay, 20% of the people cause most trouble. 20% of the people also come up with the most solution. I don't know. It's so uncanny. 20 is 19 bees, right? Could be 89. I'm not talking about that. So Mr. Pareto came up and said, look, if there is this 80-20 correlation, right? Like 20% of the countries, the climate summit is going on next week, right? 20% of the countries are causing 80% of the pollution. There's no getting away from that. You go to a dinner, 20%, they eat 80% of the food, maybe. Okay. So often useful because in a problem-solving situation, there are more than one variable. Okay. I've just picked one of the web here. There are a lot of customer complaints. Customer complaints do come, right? So customers are upset for a lot of reasons. In that case, what do I really want to work on? Or I have a lot of priorities. What do I really want to work on? Or what is taking me more time versus less time? So in this case, very easy, right? They first probably do a fishbone diagram to arrive at all possible reasons why customer may be unhappy. You remember I said it's a two-step process. First, you take the people methods, man-machine method material. You come up and say, hey, these seem like the most likely reasons. And then you collect the data. How many customers in this case, they perhaps came for a shopping mall. They said, some say parking is difficult, the sales depth was low, the lighting was poor, the shop layout was very confusing, sizes were limited. Okay, so then you actually collect the data on all these. Then you say, look, put them in the descending order. Parking difficult had the most, whereas the clothing shrink had the least number. And then the y-axis, you also have the cumulative, right? Your parking difficulty is so many. You see that line, that curved line is a cumulative. And then you just draw an 80% line. See, 80% of the people are unhappy for the first 4 reasons. So if I'm able to fix those 4 reasons, 80% of the people are happy. Once I eliminate that, then I'll pick up the next 80%. Okay. Sometimes it's not as simple as this. I might have 38 reasons why customers are unhappy. There's no way in hell an organization can focus its resources on so many causes, right? So it's like a emergency ward. What do you have in emergency ward? Because
first things first.
Absolutely. The 20% of the people require 80% of the attention, otherwise they would die. Okay, 80% is general ward, 20% is the emergency ward. It's the same principle we use all over the place. So I don't know, irrespective of when, we actually used to do an attrition analysis in our teams out there. There could always be 20% of the reasons or places that would account for 80% attrition. Then you say, Coimbatore is causing most attrition at this point of time. Just go park a couple of HR guys out there to figure out why Coimbatore is so unhappy. Then you do a fishbone diagram. They say canteen food is not good. The shift buses are not very regular. They have a lot of breakdown. Then you come and say either fire the canteen vendor or fire the transport vendor. Two causes will actually bring down Coimbatore attrition law. Okay, so these are so intertwined in our lives. It's crazy. We just go back, look at it. The number of situations we have, not just in a professional, personal life, where one of other fields can be used design is enormous. Okay. An example of where you see the possibility of using. You want to get every mentee to write. Okay. Can you use this tool there?
Didn't get this, sir.
Let's say 35 mentees. They all write something, right? They write a blog or a book or a chapter. You want to say, I want everyone to write. Is there a way you can use this to figure out how you want to go about? Not that this is the only way, but if you have used this, can you? So just look at.
Is it something like 20% of the students will cover 80% of the topics?
Exactly. So if you know the 20% of the people who are doing the 80% writing, then you say, hey, look, this part is looking good. Then you look at the next set that you need to focus on. Who do you focus on? Who do you facilitate? Who do you enable? So, maybe somebody is not comfortable with their English. Somebody is not comfortable with, their expression. So you don't look at the 20% who are doing a great job. Often, the brighter ones get all the attention. But you give them, you reward them, then focus on the next set if you have to solve a problem. Okay? Or 20% of reasons cause 80% of the grammar mistakes. Okay, then all you have to do, don't worry about entire run and Martin, right? Just do the verb and tense. That's it. 80% of the problems are eliminated.
One of those mistakes was giving a space after comma. Sorry, before comma.
Exactly. It's amazing, right? Okay.
Yes, Shravan sir identified that.
Yeah. Control charts. I'll go through this very quickly. Yeah, sorry.
I put a question in the chat. Can you just look at it for a second, and you can answer it anytime?
The current scientific process seems to be choose your goal and use your data to fit it. This seems like how the world runs. What are your thoughts? No, exactly. This is you decide the news headline and ask Google for substantiating things out there, right? Because we're here, you start with the data and arrive at the truth.
Because I'm looking at my son who's doing he's doing a project on using cameras, the cell phone camera. And so he's trying to publish a paper now. And he is creating all these graphs and everything. And I could clearly see he has a goal already and he's trying to figure out how to fit that. And so for me, that sounds like, I don't know, it sounds wrong, but I don't know whether it is wrong or what are your thoughts on it?
So Shravan, in this, in fact, I used to review the top 50 accounts, the monthly delivery operations performance review, right? I would come across that very consistently, but after all, it's very, very easy for you to see through that, right? So give me a set of data. They actually say torture the data, it will tell you what you want it to tell you. Actually, I had the slide, I actually removed it. You can take the data and articulate it the way you want to. Happens all the time in media and reporting. But the the guidance here is, they say, look, you deal with data with a lot of integrity. You move from a data to conclusion linearly, knowing you don't know what the final outcome is. See, often, there are two ways, two kinds of analysis you're trying to do, right? There's a problem that you're trying to solve, or there is a situation you're trying to explain. In the first case, you know what the symptom is. Okay, there's a leaky tap. Then you're trying to arrive at that, where it's a problem-solving situation. Where the second is a more of a decision-making or a conclusion kind of situation, where you're starting with the data and you don't know what the outcome is going to tell you. That could be entirely surprising. Take climate change, but a lot of climate change was risen to this morning. Or look at the way Elon Musk goes about finding his new solution. I mean, he just announced a cell phone Pi, he just announced. So for him, the starting point is physics, and goes on, move forward, exploring with integrity to arrive at the conclusion. So, Shravan, what you're saying is happens all the time. I see operating people do that. There's a time I spent almost 6 hours with the Marks and Spencer. We used to run all Marks and Spencer IT. The team on teaching them how to draw a Pareto, because we used to handle Windows servers, we handle Unix servers, multiple databases out there. So if I have a 5,000 Windows servers, they'll have more problems compared to if I have 100 only Unix servers. They say, look, here I think you should focus on a Windows servers because there are more problems there. So I've taken that data. I have 5,000, let's say every server has one problem. I have 5,000 servers, Windows servers. I have 5,000 problems in a month. I have 100 Unix server, I have 100 Unix problems. So what will you say? Hey, I've done a Pareto. Windows servers are causing the most problems. I'll go attend Windows servers. But the mission critical supply chain systems are all sitting on the 100 servers. So we got back and said, look, what are we really trying to do? What is the business impact of the outage? Because anytime you help a customer stabilize the system, what are you trying to do? You help them run the business better. When you turn the whole thing out there, we completely stopped working on the Windows server. We said this 100 Unix server account for about a 95% of their revenue. So what are you going to work on? So which is the reason, Shravan, when we started, we spent a lot of time on stratifying the data. Or we also 100 Unix servers, right? We say, look, average one per server. Are there 20% Unix servers that are causing 80% of the errors? And the 20% of the servers, okay, are there 20% of the 20% which are impacting 80% of the business revenue? Which is why Ishikawa says you don't arrive at an answer unless you ask a what 5 times. So, sorry, why? 5 whys, right? The server has failed. Why? Why? Because first 3 or 4 times they'll give you a symptom, they'll not arrive at the problem. And then you come back and say, how am I going to fix it? So that's a common trap people fall into. So we should spend a lot of time on saying, look, the reason we are running all this is to help customer have a more stable IT, make sure their business revenue is not impacted. If the revenue is not impacted, just come back and what you want to work on. It's not an easy one, but you cannot start with an end in mind. That's not what Stephen Covey meant. Okay. See, control chart, it's a fairly complex subject in itself. Control chart is used to make sure there is no degradation over time. I just took a simple example. That if I'm making wine or coffee, I just take a sample every day, look at its quality, and then see what is happening. You would have seen that all gas stations, they take a sample every day. They take a sample every day. Every time they get a fresh supply, they take a sample, measure its density. They're supposed to be reporting the data. If they see that the density is drifting over a period of time, that means it's petrol or diesel is coming to them polluted, etc. So when that change happens so slowly over time, you may not notice it unless you have a control chart. Control chart, you have upper control limit, lower control limit says, look, how much is allowable, what is the tolerance. It's a coffee, how much of a taste variation am I going to tolerate before I complain, etc. So control charts are used, I'm just running through it because it's a little more complicated. What it does is, if I know what a parameter should be, if I know what my weight should be, I used to use a control chart to manage my weight. I said my weight has to be between 73 and 74 kilo and hovering around middle line 73.5. So I was using Healthify Me to log every single morsel of food I eat every day to really see, am I staying at a 1900 calories consuming? I'm allowed 2800, so I'm burning 900 more calories every day. Just plot that, and actually, first time I went on, I shed 13 kilos. So what it does is, you know where you want it to be. It's like the horizon, artificial horizon in an aircraft, right? It tells you if you're drifting over a period of time. How are we on time? See, scatter diagram, I'll just rush through. I'll just spend 5 minutes on the last one, is stratification. Scatter diagram, there are sometimes you look at the data, you don't know what to make out of it. You don't know how to figure that out. Okay, let's say you've just visited a village as a health representative. You're supposed to figure out what's happening there. In the first round, you're not sure. You might just take a temperature of everyone and just plot it in a graph. Okay, age versus temperature as a first step towards figuring out overall health of the people out there. What use scatter diagram for is to see if there are any correlations. For example, New South Wales government at one point of time, Australia about 20 years back was notorious for the obesity. US and Australia were the top one obesity thing, right? That did a study. There is a campaign that went on. They said body mass index, they correlated with the systolic blood pressure. If you say, look, you're fattier, your blood pressure, your chance of mortality are higher, it may not register. I'll turn around and say, what do you mean? How can you say that? So they actually plotted the BMI with systolic blood pressure, and they found a pretty solid correlation, right? Correlation out there. So you use this often for correlation. For example, if carbon dioxide and methane levels come down, we have reason to believe that there's a negative correlation. Temperature will come down or will go up. Entire climate study was done using a simple, the scatter diagrams as a starter. Okay. And finally, stratification. In my mind, this is one of the most beautiful tools. We used to manage help desk for the Swiss bank UBS worldwide. We had New York traders. New York traders are a very unforgiving, very difficult customer to manage, because for him, there's a problem. He went to $100 million trade deal. So we started getting beaten up on a customer service quality from one particular geography in Europe, Germany. I figured out every single parameter was good. We are supposed to be at a 90%, we are at 97%. First call resolution is supposed to be 85%, we were at a 99%. We said, how the hell do we explain? On one hand, all is well. On the other hand, there's a lot of noise, the CEO is getting escalation calls. Then we say it's not going to work this way. Let's stratify the data. So we took Europe. Stratification is actually slicing the data. Stratification is nothing other than slicing. We said, let's first slice the data countrywide. Easy. We quickly came to Germany. Then we sliced the data by shift. We said, look, is it that maybe our teams in the night are not affected by that? There's no correlation. By location, there's no correlation. Then we said, let's slice it by day of the week. Still no correlation, we're going to understand. said something is wrong. Somebody came and said, in call centers for various technical reasons, they collect the data on a 20 minutes intervals. They said, look, Ian, I think let's slice the data on 20 minutes interval and study. You won't believe it. I mean, we should have done that 4 weeks before that. I don't know why we didn't do that. We found the answer. Tuesday afternoon, 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 was when the most unhappy calls were. Then we found that, say, a lot of European new recruits were actually coming to that particular office, Germany or Switzerland, on Monday. And Tuesday morning, they are given their badges and the computers. Tuesday post-lunch is when they try to log in for the first time. And they run into all kinds of issues. So all we had to do was put another 15 people available, extra help available between Tuesday 2 and 4, and the problem went away like a snap. Customer laughed and said, you allowed yourself to be beaten to death. I mean, I don't know why you couldn't think of this before. Problem when it's solved. When you find a solution, you always feel stupid about why it took us so long, right? So that's the power of stratification. Sometimes you'll not understand unless you keep slicing the data in a very, very different manner. We call it the watermelon syndrome. What color is a watermelon?
Green.
Any other opinions? What color is the watermelon? The answer is, who is looking at it? When the vendor sells you, it is green. When you cut it open, it's red. Okay, green is a happy situation, red is a trouble situation. They say when you slice the data is when you start seeing the underlying problem there. Data stratification used to be one of the most powerful things. In fact, I used to tell the operation team saying, green scares me more than red. Green says all is well. Then I said, scratch green till you start seeing the red. What I meant was, average, all look good, but slice the data in a different scenario. Take health parameter, right? You actually say, look, it's a 1,500 apartment complex in this. So what do you want to know the overall health? Then you'll actually slice the data by age. Then you slice the data by the state, right? Keralites have a different health situation than a Malayalis, than a Kannadigas, than Tamilians based on that. Then as you slice the data is when you start seeing more and more problems that are otherwise not done. So data stratification is a really, really, really powerful thing. In fact, this was used very extensively on demographic analysis, saying, look, is there when you slice the data by your demography, your ethnicity, where you live, your education, parental income, as you slice the data, you start seeing more and more correlation. Okay, so that really was the last tool. And where would you use stratification if you can? One example. Anything in the code space?
We could use stratification. Can you hear me first of all?
Yeah, very clear.
Okay, we could use stratification for like, what is the impact of TOP talks? What is the impact of TOP obsession calls? And so that's one. And I mean, I can think of many, but I think it's for people who are less than 80. I guess a certain age is here, so I better stop.
Exactly. I think once you start looking that direction, number of opportunities come our way. These tools are powerful, very, very powerful. Some of them are disarmingly simple, but intimidatingly powerful. When you use them, right, the answers you come to. Okay. There was a time when we launched these tools and Lean and Six Sigma. In Cognizant, I think we saved $375 million over 2 years. Okay, by then I think we were about $10-11 billion, $375 million straight to the bottom line. So your data analysis turned out to be one of the most profitable business units that year. It's powerful. You're familiar with this? Ebbinghaus forgetfulness curve. He says, look, in whatever you heard, right? 7 tools will be very, very familiar. And then from 100% in 20 minutes, you drop to 60% memory. And about by the time you wake up in the morning, you'll remember 30%. So the only medicine for this is the repetition. Okay. So we just do one quick listing, 2 rounds of listing, and then we'll close. Okay, what are the 7 tools? The first round, I'm going to give you a clue. I'm giving out the
Pareto
first
chart.
no,
Okay,
go in the sequence.
Should we go in the sequence? Okay, cause and
Yeah,
effect diagram.
it's only one per head.
Okay.
Check sheet.
Check sheet. Awesome. Who said that? Cool. Okay, number 2.
Fishbone diagram.
Fishbone.
Bingo. Fantastic.
Histogram.
3. Histogram. 4 is?
Pareto.
Not a new voice. Hey, Vinay, you're not a new voice. Pareto. Fantastic. 5 is?
Control.
Control chart.
Good. I was going to go back and refresh you. Control chart. 6 is?
I can tell, but I cannot.
Yeah. Positive correlation, negative correlation, no correlation.
No one is saying it. I'm saying it. Scattered.
Scatter diagram. And 7th is my favorite one. Stratification, right? Okay. Now I take away the clue. Can I have the 7? In any sequence.
Checklist.
Control. Pareto.
Fishbone diagram, control, histogram, fishbone, and
Scatter diagram, stratification.
Bingo. There you go.
histogram also.
So good. So there is a reasonable chance that you'll actually remember at least 3 or 4 of them tomorrow morning. So
one thing, Ian, what you said about memory retention, and that is one of the things I figured out a long time ago when I was teaching in the university. And so I decided I'm going to teach the most important material in a subject more and more. I keep only talking about in a chapter, if there is if I feel the basics are certain things, I'll only teach the basics every single day. I'll talk about the basics every single day until the chapter is done. I don't really care about all the other things. I'll keep on emphasizing the basic things. And so that way they'll remember the basic things and create other things using the basics.
Shravan, what tool did you use when you did that?
Oh, nothing. I just looked at the basic chapter which I was teaching, and I just did it every single day when I went to the class.
Pareto 2080.
Oh, okay. I get it. I just was not thinking from that. I was just thinking from experience.
We do it all the time, Shravan. We do it all the time. Okay, it's a public teacher training.
We do the same thing in ESL also, Ian. That we talk about values all the time.
Exactly.
We don't talk about, we wrote this book. That is an accomplishment, right? That is the result. We don't talk about that book. We talk about every day, hey, are we respecting each other? Are we respecting ourselves?
Bingo.
Are we seeing greatness in ourselves? Are we seeing greatness in others? Are we seeing beauty in ourselves? Are we seeing beauty in others? So these are the things which we talk about in some form or the other. We bring back to the same values. Only thing is we might say some other sentence, some other story, but we bring back to that. And we have been doing it for 4 years now.
And Shravan, if you really go over, we're using at least 4 or 5 tools all the time. We are using the scatter plot, we are doing a control chart, we are using histograms, we are using cause and effect, we are using it's so interweaved into life. The guys who came with the 7 tools are genius. So with that, I think I come to the
thank you, Dan.
Okay. See, data runs our lives. So it's very important to acquire a very respectful approach to how we want to deal with it. It's not going to leave you all through your career, all your life, you're making choices all the time. It just helps us make higher quality of choices more intuitively. Okay. That's it. Thank you. Thank you guys again.
That
Thank
any
you for the wonderful session. The session was really informative, interactive, and interesting too. Three eyes. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Do you have any views on the topic? Please raise your hands. Hinayanna, you can go on.
Sangeeta, thank you for coming up with 3 eyes. And like I want to hear any views about the words mentioned in the last slide. Stay relevant.
You're asking me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Ian.
So the maybe on some future fourth talk will talk about Industry 4.0 and the acceleration of irrelevance. See, never before have we seen the rate of change that we're experiencing now. The first innovation, second innovation was 70 years. Now, first innovation to innovation, next innovation, 70 seconds. In that, average life of a skill is coming down to less than 3 years. In that, unless you are learning all the time, and equally important, unless you're unlearning all the time, the speed to irrelevant is 6 months, 1 year. I mean, our times we could learn one skill, we could learn mainframe and have a 40-year career doing that. Now you can't do that anymore. So you have to learn, you have to change. Environment is changing all around. Whatever was axiomatic yesterday is relevant today. Unless we show a sense of urgency, willingness to change, willingness to learn, a half-life period to relevance is coming down to 1.5 years. That's the reason I said you can't succeed, you can't stay afloat. So learn, change. That's it. Okay.
Shravan sir.
Yeah. Well said, Sangeeta. I did love those 3 eyes.
Thank you, sir. Especially, sir, that when presentation pays more attention towards the topic.
Yeah.
That thank you dance was next level.
Yes, I love that too.
Sangeeta, I can't dance to save my life. Okay?
Yeah, so, I am about to tell that Sir only dances in the slides.
That's about it.
Like me.
So, go ahead, Sangeeta.
Completed, sir.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay. So, Ian, first of all, it was really, really good. Enjoyed it thoroughly. When I first did my research project in 1992, I had to work with data, and the way we worked with data at that time raised more questions than answers for me. And since then, I'm skeptic of everything. I am like, as soon as anyone opens their mouth, I question it. I don't take, I might just listen. I will be humble. I'll be professional about it. But inside, I'm questioning everything. Because where is the intent coming from? What is this words? What are these sentences supposed to mean? And again, the stay relevant thing is the way you explained it was really, really good, because things are changing really fast. So learning should be like breathing. You should not even think that, oh my God, I have to learn today. You should be just learning.
Sean, if you
it's like you get up in the morning and say, I'm learning. You're just doing it.
And if you have to choose between learning and breathing, I'll prefer learning.
Yes. Agree.
Because
Agree.
Deming, I think he said the day you started learning, stop learning, you already started dying.
Yes, exactly. Totally agreed. Totally agreed. It is. That is why. That is one of the reasons I'm all. That is the that's something we talk about in our group also. Is once we know we can make something possible, then it's time to think something big again.
Exactly.
You can't, because only when you are stepping into the unknown is when you feel the humanity of yourself, where you are like saying, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm confused. I am scared. I am excited. All of those emotions will come through when you are always thinking about the bigger things. And even though I'm saying all these things, I still, get it. Whenever I'm thinking the next level, it still scares me.
So true.
Yeah, the divine dissatisfaction. I love that.
GP was going to say something.
So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ian, for that was a very nice presentation actually. Just wanted to add, in fact, I started my career 41 years back after graduating from OU City as an SQC engineer in a chemical plant. And
I was teaching the priest.
No, not really. Those days we never had computers, really. So the same data analysis was not very easy. You had to use statistical tools manually to do a lot of calculations. We had to go out into the plant, collect data, and try to figure out, analyze the data to try and figure out what can be done to improve the plant performance and so on and so forth. And believe it or not, I was there for 6 years or 7 years in that department before I got moved to projects. But during that time, I realized that this was the most hated department, one, because people considered us as spies, coming to the plant to collect information, and then, later on, putting it up to the management to say, this is not good, this can be improved. So people usually considered us spies. And secondly, this was, in that sense, one of the least favored departments in a chemical plant. Most chemical engineers wanted to go to either projects or design and development or production, not to a department like SQC. But I think, having said that, I think those 6 years, laid the foundation for, to a large extent, for what I am today and the person I worked under. Because it provided an understanding of certain principles. Like you said, data, understanding data is very key to understanding so many things. We learn a lot in college about chemical engineering principles and all that. That's fine. That you can anyway learn again, you can always apply. But learning data was, I think, very, very important in my life. So your presentation to all the mentees today, I hope they've understood everything. And if they continue to apply it in their life as they go along, in every situation, I guess. So, they will, surely it will benefit them in many ways. I think that's a tremendous thing. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
GP, thank you so much. I can relate to that. Those manufacturing years form a foundation. In fact, Ishikawa once said the only technology an engineer needs to know is the ability to release a cause to an effect. He said all other technologies can do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
Any other views, ideas, or questions? If no, let's end our session.
I think next time around, you should have compulsorily one question or one comment from all the mentees who are participating, I guess.
Yes, that was good.
Seriously, GP, I'm glad you said that. I think let's actually do a formal study to see what causes the hesitation, because I've not seen a more this is not a judging environment, right? You said it's not a judging thing out there. In that case, we just do that stratification, right? Who that 20 speak most and 20 speak least. I think it's worthwhile doing that. It's important to be able to.
Absolutely. And I think, see what you rightly said. See, this is not a forum where you are facing some management where you are hesitating to ask questions because you feel you could be wrong. Nothing like that. I mean, even if it's the most stupid question in your mind, I think you should come out with it. Unless, in my opinion, unless people keep asking questions, they will never get answers. And believe me, this is the stage when you can ask questions. If I ask questions, somebody might think, after 40 years, what is this guy asking such a basic question? But I should not hesitate to ask, nevertheless. But at your age, unless and until you keep on asking questions. It may be the most stupid question that comes to your mind, but keep asking questions. Unless you do that, you will never get the answers. And later you might feel it's too late.
They say that, right? First time it's ignorance, second time it's stupidity. First time you don't ignorant, second time you're stupid, third time, you're habitually stupid.
Absolutely.
No. See, when I actually that thought comes to me saying, what we're doing Fishbone, what do we do to make it safe for people to ask questions? In fact, we saw a CEO, I think he said, look, if I don't feel stupid at least once a day, I go to bed very unhappy. So I think it's not fair. Yeah.
Nothing wrong in feeling stupid. I mean, actually,
what we will do, Ian, it is, first of all, this has been only a year-long journey where we have been gone into this realm of this digital platform. It has been a year and few months. So they are learning, they are growing, and they are they are definitely asking better questions, more questions. So what we will do is me and Vinay will try to send a survey form to the students and try to figure out what else can be done over the next few months to increase the involvement. We already know there are a couple of problems already. We know that is causing probably 80% of the problems, the Pareto, we know it's one of them is the big network issue, because the students want to talk, but they are worried that when they ask a question, you might not even able to hear it. So what we'll do is we'll take a survey. Why not do the survey anyway? This will be a good thing to do. So we'll put together a survey form and send it to all the students and see what what data we'll get, and we'll see what kind of data analysis we can do also.
And also ask them what if done by us will make it easier for them to.
Yes, definitely. We'll do that. So great. Thank you very much, Ian. Sangeeta, do you want to say any closing words?
Sir, Vivikta, can you share your screen, please?
Yeah, Sangeeta. Thank you, Ian Garu. It was really informative session about SQC tools. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you for your heart, time, and energy. So gratitude to you.
Thank you for giving me the time and audience.
Thank you, Ian Garu.